Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to that amazing Buddha statue installation, for that amazing Buddha statue. And yeah, so many people have worked on this. It's just wonderful. So are there any questions?
I do have questions.
Wait, microphone. Wait for the microphone.
I'll forget by the time the microphone comes here. So
It's on.
Which way? This way or this way? Facing me.
You speak towards the light.
A little screen.
Okay.
Speak into the light.
Jeez.
Go into the light.
So I have a question. The Buddha lies off. Okay, I have a question. Because when you were talking about the statue start to look more and more like the people from a different region has different statue. For example, even like Jesus Christ statue is different. For Africans, it's black. For Asians, a little bit more Asian. And if you go to Nelson Art Gallery, there's a huge Japanese statue of Buddha. It looked totally Japanese to me. So could you say, because I couldn't hardly hear in the garden, could you say something about this statue out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the sculptor is Laura Ramberg, and her brother Carl Ramberg is he's an extraordinary stonemason. She's an extraordinary sculptor, and he did the paths in the garden, and he did the beautiful altar, and then he assisted her in making the sculpture. And also I need to mention T.J. Everett, who is Carl's sort of assistant, apprentice, and has a lot of fabulous ideas. And Carl did the scroll. So Carl took, TJ took a very thin sheet of copper and inscribed various Buddhist poems and things from various Buddhist liturgies on it, and then it was rolled up and put into a hole in the bottom of the statue, which is very traditional. There's something like that in this one too. So what I said in my talk was that Buddha statues, for the first several hundred years after the Buddha, there were no depictions of the Buddha. They would have Buddha's footprints. You know, everyone in this room and on screen has already heard this, but I'm saying it again. They were, you know, things like footprints were sculpted, but no statues and no paintings. And then in northern Afghanistan, what was called the Gandhara region, a tradition arose of sculpture, and that was greatly influenced. It was on the Silk Road, so it was greatly influenced by Greek and Roman sculpture. So if you go to a museum and you see Buddhas from the Gandhara sculpture, you think you're looking at something from Athens, you know? Because it's very influenced by that. And around the same time, and I didn't actually know this until very recently, around the same time, there was a tradition of Buddha sculpture arising in South India, what is now South India. And those sculptures looked very much like people from South India. And then a tradition arose in China, and those sculptures looked like people from China. In Korea, they looked like people from Korea, and in Japan, they looked like people from Japan. Tibet, they looked like people from Tibet, you know? And what Laura did, which was really remarkable, is she made a statue that has no visible ethnicity. It's like if everybody in the world got together and married and had babies and did that for many, many generations, that's what you'd see. So it has no ethnicity, and it has all ethnicities. You know, you can see any kind of ethnicity in it. And so I think that's what you were talking about. Yeah. And I have to say, the thing about Jesus is, it's not true that in Africa, Jesus looks like Africans, and in many places in Africa, Jesus still looks like Europeans because it's called colonialism. However, our Buddha is not a colonialist Buddha. Our Buddha is an all human Buddha. And the other thing about our Buddha, and this was more noticeable earlier in the process, the Buddha actually, if you look carefully at the construction of the head and the jaw, it has a little bit of an ape quality to it. So it's trans-species Buddha. It's absolutely remarkable. And people who are seeing this online, you know, when we put it up, if you have a chance to come to Kansas Zen Center and go into our garden, you should look at this amazing Buddha, because it is really an amazing Buddha. So thank you for asking your question. Yeah, because in Buddha, there is no male and female, there is no old and young, there is no black and white and red and yellow, which is stupid because everyone's brown anyway, some shade of brown, right? But anyway, there are no distinctions. There's no America, there's no Russia, there's no Ukraine, there's no France, there's no Mexico, there's no China, there's no distinctions. There's no human, there's no butterfly. It would be nice if she could have made that statue look a little like a butterfly, but I think that even Laura couldn't do that. But yeah, so there are no distinctions in Buddha. You know, in Buddha's mind, no distinctions. So that's a very important mind to have, because I mean, in some sense you have to have, you know, you're negotiating in the social world and you're perceived a certain way and you perceive others in a certain way. And this is, you know, how we negotiate with each other and how we go through the world and so on and so forth. But way down deep, way down deep, way down deep, there are no distinctions. Way down deep, there is only Buddha nature. And everybody has this Buddha nature. All beings have this Buddha nature. And I see that Eileen raised her hand, so I will call in Eileen.
I wish I could have been there.
I wish you could have been too.
I look forward to seeing the pictures.
Okay.
I wondered if you opened the eyes of the Buddha.
No, we didn't. Sorry. Maybe another time we will do that. But you know what? The Buddha's eyes are already open. If your eyes are open, the Buddha's eyes are open. Okay? So thank you. Liz, you have a question?
Yes. So, you know, that's a wonderful thing that Buddha is. There is no male or female. There is no race. There is no. But I think that there's an inherent flaw in that too, that we overlook, which is you make, you get. So there is no colonialism. You make colonialism. There's no colonialism. There is no, but you make, you get.
That's not what you make, you get means. Okay?
Okay. So what does it mean?
So this is, I actually asked Liz to ask about you make, you get. So this is a mistake people make about logic. A implies B does not mean B implies A. So it's the colonialists who make colonialism. And it's the rest of the world who gets what colonialism makes, including the colonialists. Okay? So it's true that whatever you make, you get. But it's not true that whatever you get is something that you make. One does not mean the other. So yeah, whatever you make, you get. But it's not true that whatever you get is something you make. And it's true that the notion of colonialism is an idea, and any idea is something that we make. But it's a useful idea. And as any other idea, you know, on the borders, it starts to dissolve. Any idea is like that. On the borders, it just starts to dissolve. But it's useful, and then how do you use this idea is very important. So in some sense, colonialism is an idea, that's true, and we make this idea of colonialism, and we do it so that we can deal with tremendous suffering that comes about by very, very similar behaviors. And so it's a useful idea if we can use it to deal with that suffering. It's not a useful idea if all we can do is yell at each other and say, you're a colonialist. No, you're a colonialist. That's no good. But if we can use this idea to alleviate suffering, then that's a correct use of the idea of colonialism. Okay? I'm reading a very interesting book. It's called, God, I can never get the name straight. It's something like All That She Carried, I believe it's called. And it's by a woman named Tyra Banks, but she spells her first name T-I-Y-A, not T-I-R-A. And it won all kinds of awards, and it deserves it. And it's about an artifact from slavery where this young girl was given a sack by her mother because she was going to be sold. And she was 9 years old, and she's given a sack by her mother that contains a dress, some pecans, and I forget what the other thing is, and then love. And this sack is, the young girl grows up and is, freed, and because there's a civil war, so all the slaves are freed, and she gets a family, and it comes down to her granddaughter or great-granddaughter, who then inscribes the story, in embroidery. She writes in embroidery on the sack. This was given, and this is what it had. And so Tyra Banks wrote a whole book based on this, and she uses it as a lens to talk about everything. I mean, she talks about the family structure. She talks about, the options that were available for slaves. She talks about the, coding by how you dressed, and how, women, who were enslaved how they would manage to find ways to make themselves beautiful. And they could be beaten for it, but they wanted their dignity. So she talks about all these things. I just finished the chapter on the slave markets, and then she's going to be talking about, I think the next chapter is on food. And so she uses this artifact to, just cast a whole, and you think about this society, you have this society that is completely based on the oppression of others. So Ashley's the name of the girl. It's a very unusual name. And then her mother was named Rose. And they were enslaved in South Carolina around the Charleston area. And enslaved people were actually the majority in South Carolina. Here's a little fact. John Locke helped write the Constitution of South Carolina, which was all about how you could enslave people. I mean, not all of it, but that was part of it. John Locke, hello. Those people who worship John Locke, hello. You probably didn't know this about him. Anyway, so you have this society that, the white society considers itself this, upper class. They have all these beautiful things. Of course, they didn't make them, all these beautiful things, all this culture and everything, and it's based on this incredible oppression. So one group is making, and another group is getting. And the question is, no matter what situation you're in, how do you maximize your compassion? How do you maximize your dignity? How do you maximize your agency? And it's really remarkable what people did. The people who were enslaved, people who were extremely poor, people who are without homes, what people do in extreme circumstances to still have compassion, to still have dignity, to still have agency. So that's, I think, the thing to look at. So thank you for your question. Are there any other questions? We have time for one short question. Okay, it's time for announcements.